production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Citizens Insurance Company of America, providing home, auto, boat, and business insurance through independent agents. Citizens Insurance, based in Michigan.
And now this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubick.
Thank you, Joe Donovan, and welcome to this week's edition of Off the Record, a raucous debate over welfare spending in the Michigan House. And later on, Libertarian candidate for the U.S. Senate, Jon Coon, will join us. But right now, let's go over and join tonight's Off the Record panel. From the Gongwer News Service, Carrie Kapersky. From Mears, we have Deanne Molinari. And from the Booth newspapers, Peter Luke. Let's first of all take the John Moorberg story, Deanne. Former director of the House Fiscal Agency in court again this week, pleading guilty to 2 counts of conspiring to embezzle. What's going on in that investigation?
Well, he already pleaded guilty to felony charges, so it looks like he's done. His sentencing for the state charges are, that's at the end of August. And one of his conditions for pleading guilty was that he would serve any federal time and any state time consecutively. So he's already preparing for that. So he's pretty much done. Catherine Beckholt, the bookkeeper that was also charged in all this, she faces sentencing next week. Mm-hmm. And then I think that's, and then Malik Hadari, he's the so-called consultant. Suzanne Sanford, who works for the Attorney General's office, she was saying that he didn't actually do any work for the fiscal agency, but he's also up on charges, and he's expected to plead guilty in the state and federal court, but that's not coming up till later in the month.
And the investigation continues. Part of the Moorberg agreement was that he would continue cooperating with investigators to see what else unfolds, whatever characters are left in all of this.
Basically, what he pled guilty to was it was part of a kickback scheme. Right. They would write checks on the House Fiscal Agency, and he would get the money back.
Yeah, they said that he wrote checks to Malik Hadari and Giochetto, David Giochetto is his first name. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the question here in my mind is why these guys thought they could get away with this.
They did.
For a long time.
For a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at there are records over in DMV which clearly stated how much money a month they were writing checks out of their impressed cash fund, which was clearly inappropriate. $10,000, $15,000 a month. I mean, it was a lot of money when the limit is supposed to be a $100 check out of that account. Yeah, so they did get away with it for a long time, and I think one of the amazing things about this story is that it went on for
as long as it did.
Exactly. Yeah. There have been cases in the past. There was the instance where DSS, a couple working for the DSS, took a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But the House Fiscal Agency operated under the glare of the Capitol. There should have been plenty of oversight, and there clearly wasn't. And either this speaks to the lack of that oversight, or actually how easy it is to steal money.
Mm-hmm. And there was obviously a degree of trust there. I mean, everybody in this town liked John Moorberg. There's no question about it. I mean, he was a very gregarious guy, did all the right things, and everybody just assumed everything was hunky-dory over there. Come to find out, he was using some of this money to remodel his house and to do whatever. Now, they would try to guarantee his state pension, which is, I think, about $2,700 bucks a month.
They were talking about all of it.
Yeah, to try to get some of this money back. Let's switch to the welfare debate. Got kind of interesting in the House this week. We are taping on Thursdays. The debate is not over yet, but conservatives are basically winning all the battles with the liberals on this bill, are they not?
Absolutely, and they're really talking about a whole change in attitude toward welfare reform. The legislators yesterday were not winning on just marginal votes here on some pretty conservative amendments. They were talking about co-pays for Medicaid's covered services that are non-emergency and emergency rooms, getting into a little bit of the health care cost debate. They were going into restrictions on just exactly how you should qualify for assistance, what groups should qualify, and any attempts by Democrats to increase grants or expand the population receiving grants were rejected by the same wide margin of votes.
We're talking in the neighborhood of 60 to 64 votes on all of this stuff.
Right. Absolutely.
Tom Scott was the one, and Bob Emerson was another, 2 gentlemen, Democrats, liberals from Flint, who tried to do what the Republicans said was a backdoor grant hike, giving $15 to welfare recipients if they got into the jobs program. They said this would be for transportation. Now, they were basically hooted off the floor, weren't they, on that?
Right, right. And like Carrie was saying, I mean, all of these were not marginal votes. These were clear-cut votes. And there was only that one amendment I was telling you that was reconsidered that was a clear-cut vote. Originally, it said that welfare families couldn't receive additional money for having more kids. And it seemed like a good policy for a lot of people. This way it would discourage large families. And anyway, though, halfway into the debate, Right to Life started sort of panicking, saying that this measure would encourage abortions. And so they started calling members off the floor, and the vote passed the first time by like 60-some votes, and then it was reconsidered. And after a few hours, after there was a little more lobbying done, the amendment was taken off. There was only like 35 lawmakers that supported it, so it's kind of a...
Yeah, I think that conservatives were really trying to shift the debate from what the quality of life is while you are on welfare to how do you encourage people off of it. And they really think, and they're really arguing here, that it has not worked to give people more money while they're there, that you need to make life difficult for them while they're on it and give them more like negative incentives, essentially.
I also thought it was interesting, you saw the specter of a conservative Republican like Shirley Johnson getting up on the floor and quoting Bill Clinton as part of her argument against the Democrats on the other side on welfare. Traditionally, Peter, as you know in this town, welfare is always a raucous debate because it's a good election year issue.
Sure it is. And I mean, it's what you're finding here is just this interesting example of how much things have changed around here.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look when Engler came in, there were just brutal debates over ending general assistance and opposition to tax cuts. Well, in the last couple of weeks now, you've got, again, you had the Emerson Amendment, which was $15 a month. The last grant increase in this state was somewhere around 1985. The AFDC benefit is still at 45% of the federal poverty level. I don't buy the conservative argument that welfare is a lifestyle choice that these people make, that they're choose to live on $400 a month because the state will support them in that fashion. And so you have the Emerson Amendment getting very little support at all, half his caucus.
Right, bailed out on them.
Yeah. And meanwhile, you have the House Speaker saying, well, okay, now we have to pass a $110 million tax cut for business. And it's just an amazing, amazing sea change in attitude in the state among Democrats who have basically taken the position that we can't win at our own game, so we're going to try and beat John Engler at his.
Well, and go ahead.
Well, and one of the strategies that I was surprised was not used yesterday was to raise the target for the DSS budget at this point in the game so that they could make some of these arguments for amendments. But, I mean, Shirley Johnson kept getting up over and over again saying, all right, where are we going to come up with this money for this amendment, for that amendment? I mean, they did agree to an amendment that would put the budget over target by $7.7 million, extending some coverage for prescriptions and other medical care. But overall, I mean, that was really the crux of her arguments against them. When I talked to House Democratic Speaker Curtis Hertel yesterday, he said, well, we want to wait and deal with targets when the bill is in conference committee. Well, that's not when all of this, all of their arguments and all of their amendments are going to be on the wayside by that.
Well, and it is clear that they do want to cut taxes. You're right. They want to do the single business tax. The thing that surfaced yesterday is they want to take the tax off of private pensions to level the playing field because public employees don't pay on their taxes and private folks do, and the UAW retirees are going bonkers over this. So that's a $67 million chunk out of the $400 million surplus. So tax cuts in an election year are just really good, particularly with retirees, because those folks vote.
Sure.
And they vote in big numbers.
I expected them to say, yesterday that argument didn't really come out, well, we can use a surplus if we put this, if we provide more, a broader definition for the emergency relief fund or
No
whatever.
way.
That never came up, and I have expected everyone to sort of scramble, especially in DSS.
And frankly, Democrats have some of their own ideas for tax cuts. I think they want to be part of the tax cuts during an election year.
There's much more pop in that than there is giving more money to welfare recipients. All right, quickly on the Engler pregnancy story. What's going on there?
First Lady Michelle Engler is pregnant with triplets. and the due date is sometime in early December. And anybody who knows them knows how badly they have wanted to have children. So I imagine this has to be one of the happiest moments in his life. And
absolutely.
everybody should be happy for him.
The governor kind of quipped when this story first surfaced earlier this year that, you know, if they became pregnant in an election year, that everybody in this town would accuse him of a political ploy to sop up votes, particularly with female voters. I'm not going to put you guys on the spot by asking that question. I'll ask Peter instead. How does this play politically?
Oh, I think it helps him a lot. If you look at this latest 30-second ad, Michelle is on talking about what a warm, kind, generous person the guy is, and not to say he isn't, but that isn't necessarily, at least the campaign feels that may not necessarily be the public perception of him. And so, you know, Governor Engler as daddy certainly helps.
Won't it be interesting to see when we go down to the Capitol today to see if there will be any Democrats of those running for governor who will cast aspersions on this thing? This is not the kind of story that you go out and try to make political hay on, right?
Right, and I really think that it's kind of humorous that all this is happening right now, because I know that since Proposal A and some of the collective bargaining issues, there have been some personal attacks against Engler, it directly related to Michelle and John's attempt to have a child. The bumper sticker, something about, you know, John Engler doesn't have kids and he doesn't care about yours. Well, you know, this is going to change some of that around.
Especially with three.
I
wonder if they know what they're in for.
Well, and I think it was either you or Peter that was saying before the show, though, that that she's not going to be, you know, being pregnant, she's not going to be running around 8 months pregnant campaigning for him in November.
This is an interesting point, because I think a lot of people in this town felt that she was the governor's secret weapon, as we saw in the campaign commercial that we analyzed last week. She does very, very well out on the stump, and this may hold her back depending on, you know, how the pregnancy goes and everything.
It might make him look a little kinder. You know, if he drags out his wife, who's 7 or 8 months pregnant, on the campaign trail, I mean, I think that
there goes the women's vote for sure, right? And some sensitive men's vote too, I would hope.
Yeah, so maybe it might say, well, no, you know, Michelle would like to be here, but, you know.
Well, we wish them very well, and I'm sure, as you're right, Peter, this is a very happy week for them to make the announcement. Although they are not saying anything public about this for obvious reasons. This is a privacy issue. Why do we do this story, do you think?
I think people are interested about your family life, your background when you're a public official, particularly because I think we've all been following since John and Michelle got married. I mean, the timing of their wedding and everything was so close to the gubernatorial election.
It was after the election in December. Right.
And I think that people have just been, they've had more interest in that.
Well, it certainly has been a long time since we've had the patter of little feats in the executive residence. In fact, I can't remember the last time. Jay Blanchard was in his teens. The Millikins had a daughter that was off at school, and Bill was there for a little while. And I didn't look in the history book yet as to see the last time we've had young babies in the executive residence.
Well, we'll see if the due date is after the election, so we'll see if that holds.
Yeah. Now, the governor's office say there's been lots of babies in the executive residence during the press party at Christmas time. Let's call in Jon Coon at this juncture. Jon Coon is the Libertarian Party candidate in Michigan for the U.S. Senate. This is his first try for political office. He used to work for a timber company, was born in Henderson, Michigan, served in the National Guard and military service for 8 years, and is a member of the NRA. His campaign is a minority party campaign, but he says he's got a chance to win. Coon here to discuss his candidacy. Mr. Coon, welcome to our program. Carrie's got the first question.
Given the difficulty of third-party candidates, what makes it worthwhile for you to run for this, and what do you hope to get out of running this campaign in terms of the Libertarian Party's gains in Michigan?
What do we hope to get out of it? We hope to win the election, number one. That's the whole reason for our being in this race. It's an uphill battle, yes, but I don't know of any downhill battles that are worth fighting. I think this country needs change, and I think it needs a change from a third-party direction. I don't think the other two parties will ever get the kind of change done that the people in this state and around the country want to see.
What kind of change are you talking about?
Well, it'd be nice to start out with some fiscally conservative policies for once. It would be nice to pass a balanced budget, which we have not done in over 20 years. And I can remind you that we've had 3 Republican administrations and 2 Democratic administrations over that 20-year period, that at any given time, any unbalanced budget could have been stopped with 1 presidential veto and 34 United States senators to back it up. That's never happened. There is no fiscally conservative party in Washington.
When Spence Abraham and Ron Romney sat there, they said basically the same thing.
Sure they did.
What's the difference between you and them?
They've been saying it for 20 years. I just got done saying it only takes 35 true fiscally conservative people with courage in this country to stop any piece of legislation that's economically irresponsible. For 20 years, that has not happened. Now, how long are we going to continue to listen to it? The reason it hasn't happened is because Washington is controlled by two political parties, and those two political parties are far more concerned with maintaining their own power base than they are with actual principles. Now, if that's not true, then explain to me why we can't find 35 people with the courage enough to stop a budget that isn't balanced.
The Libertarians have been making that argument for close to 20 years, too. I've been listening to
Sure.
Libertarians. So why haven't you won any elections, then, if this is such an appealing thing to voters?
Good question. We have 116 Libertarians serving in public office around the country as high up as state legislators, and you can check our track record anytime you want.
And how many in Michigan?
In Michigan, none.
Why not?
Because Michigan hasn't pushed as hard as the other states have pushed, and the voters
You
haven't
guys
been
have
ready.
always had a candidate running for governor. You've
Sure.
always had candidates, and obviously you guys have not caught on.
You ever seen one campaign as hard as I have, Tim?
Is there going to be, you said that it's going to be change as your theme. Is that sort of be tied into the last election? Are you hoping to get some momentum? People seem to be, backing Ross Perot and supporting change. Is that your strategy?
Well, the momentum's already there. There's no question about it. There's a vast vein of frustration and discontent in this country. No question that it's there. A lot of people have given up hope on the political system altogether. They don't think that there's any way that we're going to change it. They've almost given up. That's the real challenge here. It's not selling the Libertarian Party's message. We've already got more than enough people out there to win with. The question is the problem is getting to them and making sure that they understand that there is an alternative that they can depend on. And you can depend on us. We do have a track record, and you can check that track record.
So how do you balance the budget?
Well,
Cut taxes, raise taxes, or cut spending?
Well, you never raise taxes, not when you've got the tax burden that this country has. And there's absolutely no problem with holding Congress responsible to spend the money they have and no more.
We have among the lowest tax burdens in the industrialized world.
It's too high. We're not the industrialized world. We're the United States of America, and we don't need more taxes. We need less.
So where would you cut spending?
That's a legitimate question. What you do, Peter, is you've got 99 other senators to work with up there.
No, what programs would you cut?
That's what
Would
I'm
you
getting.
cut Social Security?
That's what I'm getting to.
Would you cut Social Security?
Hang on. You've got 99 other senators up there to work with. That's what I'll have.
Mm-hmm.
They're all going to have their own ideas as to what needs to be cut.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably going to be necessary to make some compromises. I'll make them. I would be willing to accept a 10% across-the-board cut if that's what it takes.
In all
Okay?
entitlement programs?
Everything. Defense, entitlements, everything.
Social Security?
Because that's what it's
Social
going
Security?
to take. Sure. Everything. That's what it's going to take.
How about repeal the
What would that raise?
10% may or may not be enough. It's going to be close.
All right, if you're so much against tax, why not repeal the income tax then?
Why not, Tim?
Would you favor that?
Let me just ask you, do you think we had enough government in 1986?
Well, my question was, you want to repeal the income tax?
Yeah, and
you're
my
in favor of
question
that.
is, do you think we had enough government in
Well, is that
1986?
I mean, if you took the income
It
tax,
is.
yeah.
Do you think we had enough government in 1986? Because that's what we'll have if we repeal the income tax.
Now,
That's
people
how-
will sit at home and say, it's easy for you to say, repeal the income tax, but it's irresponsible. What would you say to
not
those critics?
irresponsible. What's irresponsible is continuing to pass budgets that are far in excess of the money we have to pay for them and continuing to raise taxes on the American people.
Who'd you vote for governor last time around?
For governor, in this state, I was disappointed.
Who'd you vote for?
Disappointed wasn't on the ballot last time I checked. Who'd you vote for?
I voted for John Engler.
Would you vote for him again?
No,
How come?
because he's been a disappointment.
How come?
He's not pursuing the fiscally conservative policies that I expected him to pursue. Proposal A was a joke, and it was a bad joke on the people of this state. It was blackmail, and it was not what he promised on the campaign
He
trail.
promised you property tax relief, and you delivered it, didn't he?
No, that's not what he promised the people of this state. He promised property tax cuts. What he gave us was bait and switch, and there's a big difference.
What do you think you're going to run against in the Senate race? Who do you think who do you think is going to come out in the primaries?
You know, I don't know who's going to come out of the primaries. It's one of the most hotly contested races in Michigan history, and there are obviously a lot of contenders for it, and I'm not sure who the Republicans or Democrats are going to send. Obviously, we're down to two on the Republican side. The Democratic side, we don't know yet. it doesn't make a big difference to me who comes out of the primary, because they're going to have the same basic essential questions to answer, and that is, how do you, as a freshman Democrat or Republican, expect to get Congress to change the way the American people want them to change? I, as a Libertarian, can do that because I've got the freedom of action to move when I get there. I can do things that they cannot do because they're married to their parties. They don't have that freedom of action, and they're going to have to explain how, as a freshman senator, they're going to get anything done to change the direction of a nation when Ronald Reagan couldn't do it.
But it doesn't just take freedom to get things done. You have to be able to have some votes alongside you. Why do you think that as a third-party candidate that you're actually going to have cooperation from the other parties if you should get elected?
Let me tell you something about the folks that we have in Washington. They'll cooperate with anyone on anything if that's what they think they need to do to feather their own cap. They do it all the time with the other parties. Republicans cooperate with Democrats all the time, and vice versa.
So in other words, you're going to
And
make
they'll
deals with the
cooperate
politicians, right?
If I know how I'm going to vote on something based on principles and they don't, then why shouldn't I get everything I can for that vote?
But if
But
you're...
do you think that there's a philosophical consensus up there that that you can tap into to move your agenda forward?
I think that we have elected a lot of good people over the past couple of election cycles, especially in '92, and I think that there are a lot of them up there who would like to be more responsible than they are. What they need is they need someone who's got the freedom to move, that doesn't have the heel of one of those two parties across his throat. And I think we can expect to see a lot of support from them.
Name
Yes,
two
I do.
politicians that you admire.
Two politicians that I admire: Thomas Jefferson.
Bad question, Skubick. Modern-day politicians, okay?
Modern-day politicians that I
Yeah.
admire.
Somebody living today, breathing.
I admired Ronald Reagan's economic policies. I think he was a very poor administrator and that he got very little of it done. And I think that's a typical example of the way things are done in Washington today. When the President of the United States can't even get the things done that he wants to get done because he's constantly hemmed in by politics, that's a big problem.
Give me one more.
We need a third party.
Give me another one.
Recently, I can't give you one.
How about Ross Perot?
Ross Perot, I'll say this for Ross Perot. Here's something that I greatly admire about him, and that is that he left behind one of the most patriotic political groups that I have ever seen in my life.
Was he a demagogue?
I don't know, and I'm not going to make that kind of a judgment. I will say that the United We Stand movement he left exemplifies the patriotic undercurrents that we're seeing in this country today.
Did you
and
vote for him?
I certainly admire him for that. No, I did not.
You
I
did not.
voted for our Libertarian candidate.
To what extent might you think you might be able to tap into the Perot organization that was left?
Well, I've spoken now to nearly all of the United We Stand chapters in the state of Michigan, and I've seen some very solid support there, no question about it. In fact, if I had to estimate, I'd say 80% of those who have actually heard me speak would be supportive of me. You got to understand that
80%?
Yes, a lot of these United We Stand folks have nearly made a solemn vow to themselves that they will not vote for a Republican or a Democrat if there's another sane candidate in the race. That's how frustrated people are.
Are they going to
where-
donate money to you or volunteer
We
for
already
your
have
campaign?
many of them on our contributor list and on our
How much money have you
volunteer list.
raised?
About $50,000 to date.
Where are you on drug decriminalization? That's an idea that's becoming
Yeah.
closer a topic of discussion. That's
Yes.
one that Libertarian Party has advocated
It's
for
one we've
a long time.
advocated for 23 years. We
Why?
haven't changed our position at all on it because,
What are the benefits of that?
well, the policy we have right now is ridiculous. And people like William F. Buckley Jr. agree with me, so I'm in pretty good company there.
Ban
Now,
on assault weapons.
ban on defense weapons.
Assault weapons.
Defense weapons.
Call it what you will.
I'll call it defense weapons, and what it is it's a ban on ugly weapons that are functionally no different than weapons that they didn't ban. It's a cheap shot by Congress to try to appear to be anti-crime and tough on crime, and what they've actually done is ban the American right to own those
But
weapons.
do you think the typical citizen ought to have the right to go in and buy an AK, whatever, on the local
The
gun shop?
typical citizen already does not have the right to buy an AK-47 or an M16. Those weapons are banned already. What we just tried to ban is weapons that are replicas, semi-automatic replicas of those assault rifles. It's not the same thing, not the same thing at all. There are weapons that are functionally identical that they didn't touch. This is a ploy by Congress to try to appear to be tough on crime by doing something that has absolutely no effect on crime but is emotionally appealing.
So what do you support to stop crime? I mean, you're talking about...
How about holding people responsible and accountable for their actions? How about the first time you stick a pistol in somebody's face, you go to prison and you stay there? How about
For life?
How about we start using the concept of restoration in our justice system, something that's been totally missing. The first thing that you should be required to do is restore the victim, and that means to the greatest extent possible. You can't restore a murder victim, but you can work the rest of your life paying that victim's
What do you think of the
family.
media coverage of your campaign?
I think it's been fair to date, and we said from the very beginning that when we earn coverage, we'll get it, and we've earned it, and we've been getting it.
Don't you have a tough time convincing people that you ought to be talked to?
I think I'm doing pretty well today.
What's your view on abortion?
I'm pro-choice.
Okay.
I don't think as a United States Senator that it's my business to make that choice for somebody else. I see it as a mind-your-own-business issue.
Okay, if you weren't in this race, who would you vote for the U.S. Senate? Or would you stay at home?
If I weren't in this race, I would either get in it or encourage a libertarian to get in it.
But for the sake of argument here, who do you like on the other side, either Democrat or Republican?
I don't. There's no argument there.
Who do you have most in common with in terms of your agendas?
Well, let's take two opposite examples. Let's take Lana Pollock, who is probably one of the most socialist, economically, candidates that you could find. She's also one of the most liberal candidates on personal freedom issues that you could find, and compare her to, say, Spence Abraham, who's a typical right-wing Republican, who's conservative economically, but when it comes to personal issues, doesn't believe in freedom too much. Now, you can take both of those and find things that I like in both of them. And one of the things that is a little disturbing to me about the press is that the Republicans and the conservatives will insist that they're right, and the liberals will insist that they're right, and the libertarians insist that there's something to be found that's worthwhile in both of them, but we're the ones that are nuts.
Mr. Coon, I have to say bye-bye. Thanks for joining us on our program. Also, thanks to Peter and Carrie and Deanne. I'm Tim Skubick for Off the Record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Citizens Insurance Company of America, providing home, auto, boat, and business insurance through independent agents. Citizens Insurance, based in Michigan.
Michigan public TV stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record with Tim Skubick.